My friends, welcome. So, our vision for our work is really normalizing talking about death and dying on the regular. And this work is very much about life giving. The name Shomer in Hebrew means guard. And in Jewish tradition, the Shomer is the person or people who take turns sitting with the body from the time of death until burial. We understand that the soul is alive within the body when we're alive, and the soul begins a journey of separation from the moment of death onward. And one of our founders gave us the name Shomer to evoke that image of sacred accompaniment, just as we sit with the body as the soul begins its journey beyond the body. Our work in teaching, training, education is meant to accompany you through the journey of confronting your own mortality, to be able to talk about life and death more openly, more frequently, and to do it with the benefit of Jewish wisdom. Our work takes form in three layers. The first is the time before death. Today, how do we live well in the face of mortality, knowing that tomorrow is never guaranteed? How can we prepare for the realities of our mortality, inspired by and guided by Jewish wisdom? The second level is the transition. How do we add meaning to end of life moments Jewishly? What does it look like in that space at the end of life, between life and death, to add Jewish wisdom and ritual to that experience? And we'll talk a little bit about that today. And the third piece is mourning. What does it look like to mourn and to grieve Jewishly? And we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. So if you're new here, we are so happy to see you for the first time. And you can read more about our work on our website. And now I want to ground us for a few minutes in Jewish time and space before I introduce our speaker. We are currently in a period of mourning on the Jewish calendar. It's a period called the 3 weeks that began by marking the 17th day of last month, the month of Tammuz on the Jewish calendar, which historically has been told to us was the day on which the walls of the ancient city of Jerusalem were breached. And from that moment of the breaching of the walls toward a date that we mark this week, Tisha B'Av, we observe a 3-week period of mourning. Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, is the day on which the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, not once, but twice, we're told, among other calamities that befell the Jewish people throughout time. And beginning with the month of Av, so 7 days ago, we intensify the anticipation of marking this day of mourning on the calendar. For 3 weeks, some people will refrain from listening to live music, from going swimming, and the 9 days intensify that period. We add, some do traditionally, refraining from eating meat during the 9 days. All practices to help ground us in anticipating the experience of remembering Tisha B'Av, a day on which great destruction happened to our people. And we know that Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, is on the calendar each year. And so these rituals, the 3 weeks, the 9 days, kind of offer a slow burn leading up to this sad day on the calendar. We don't hold weddings during this period traditionally, and refrain from other happy things that can be scheduled at other times. This past Shabbat was called Shabbat Chazon, the Sabbath of Vision, as the opening words from the portion of the prophets we read on Shabbat morning set out a vision. And the Torah reading, the opening book of Deuteronomy, the opening of the book of Deuteronomy that we read this past Shabbat, offers a vision of a future without our leader Moses. The Torah portion marks the beginning of a long address, one that will consume the entire book of Deuteronomy, the final of the 5 books of Moses. In its entirety, we can read the book of Deuteronomy kind of as an ethical will from Moses, in which he recounts the history of the Israelites and offers instructions to prepare the people for a future without him. What might the Israelites have been thinking and feeling as Moses prepares him for his death? They're anticipating their chance to enter the land of Israel, but they're also anticipating the loss of their leader. They and Moses may very well have been experiencing what we call anticipatory grief, the grief felt before someone dies by those close to them. Anticipatory grief can feel like a buildup to the real grief. I put the real in quotes. Anticipatory grief merits its own examination as a distinct form of grief, different from the grief we feel after a death occurs. And so, for that reason, I'm really grateful to have here with us today our grief expert extraordinaire, new friend of Shomer Collective, Chief Grief Officer at the Memory Circle, Barri Leiner Grant. And with that, let's get started. So, welcome, Barri.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
great
for
to have you
having me.
here. We'd love to hear a little bit about your work and how you got into it. Who are you? What do you do?
Sure, sure. So thank you for having me, and it's so nice to gather here today. I am the self-proclaimed Chief Grief Officer of an organization that I started called the Memory Circle. I lost my mother, Ellen, in 1993 quite suddenly and without warning, and I thought, there has to be a better place and a better way to explore grief than the support that was shared with me. It was a return to work and a very unsupported loss for me. And I kept meeting motherless daughters wherever I went. And as part of another training, I just in my love of yoga and the way that felt best to me to show up for my grief, to move my body, to move some of this through me. I became certified in my grief. And as part of our journey, we had to share something that we would give back to community. And what I decided to give back to community was a circle where we would sit shoulder to shoulder with others who had experienced loss of any and every incarnation. And that circle grew to become formally and officially the Memory Circle. So now I sit with clients one-on-one and in groups and on retreats to support grief of all kinds, death and non-death loss, and also sometimes in the diagnosis that they may receive, which became very true to my family when we received a mild cognitive impairment diagnosis for my father, Neil, who passed away last January after being his caretaker for over 10 years, living beside his memory loss. So anticipatory grief was something that also came into my purview and my personal experience in a way that I had sat with many clients over the years, but it had never come to me. And ironically, it brought a lot of people, as I shared my experience, it brought a lot of people to come and see me before the death loss, to
Mm.
work with them along the trajectory of this part of their journey, which I think is extraordinary.
So, what are those tools that you use to work with people and supporting
Mm,
them before the death loss
yeah.
happens?
I think most importantly, we need to name a death loss grief that I am grieving. I think that is extraordinarily important. I think naming it brings us immediate witnessing and immediate relief, right? Most of us think grief begins when someone dies, but as we've all just said, it starts long before the loss, especially with the diagnosis. And there are many other areas that we'll name as we go into this conversation. I think some people think that they'll come to me and say, I'm pre-grieving. And they hope that in anticipation that will make the grief on the other side feel less heavy. And I say, that is not the truth, but it is a hope that if we do acknowledge what is already happening, if we can acknowledge I am a griever, if we can be witnessed and heard and seen in this grief and also ask for help and support, I say my unofficial term for this is that we will find clean grief on the other side. We will be in the missing them, but we won't be in the what could I have done while they were very much alive, while I was reckoning with this, and I am here. And so there are so many ways we can do this. Again, as I said, sometimes people think anticipatory grief happens like in hospice. It happens during Alzheimer's, dementia, a terminal illness or diagnosis, but a prognosis, addiction,
Mm,
infertility, a divorce that's unfolding, watching your parent decline. A lot of people come to me when they have elderly parents,
mhm,
and even when a child is preparing to leave home. So,
mhm,
um, and sometimes we get into the juggle of what I call compare and despair, which is
mhm,
that we don't think what we are going through. For example, you've never experienced a loss before, and your child is leaving the home, and the nest is feeling empty, and your identity of parent or caretaker has changed, and all of a sudden you realize this feels really confusing. This person is very much alive and well, and this loved one is still here. Why am I feeling this way? So
mm,
naming this grief without feeling like there's some grief Olympics or some hierarchy here, really is to name it. And so some of the grief, I call it grief tending, right? When we show up for it, we get to we don't choose a diagnosis. We don't choose some of the things that come along. We may choose to send a child to college and support them in that idea. But what we do have autonomy over is the way that we meet our grief. And I think my uh, colleague, Claire Bidwell Smith, who's been a guest here, calls that conscious grieving. And I think
mm,
that is when we realize that we do have some control and power over, if you will, what is coming up for us, unlike sudden loss,
mm. Can you say a little bit more about that control? I think a lot of us would like to have control, but my
right?
grief kind of just smacks me when I'm not expecting it. Does
Right.
that mean I can control it somehow if I name it?
If you bring some of the tools toward you, maybe you find a support circle. Maybe you are writing about it. You find a journaling practice to be cathartic and helpful. You talk to your person about how you're feeling. I am grieving. I would like to spend time with you that feels important. I would like to tell you things and have you tell me things about what end of life looks like. When my dad was experiencing the very early stages of memory loss. And we hear this term a lot with that kind of a diagnosis because they are very much alive in front of us and we are losing them slowly over time. But I asked his wishes. I asked his wishes, and I think it's infinitely important that we have these harder conversations. What do you want end of life to look like for you? What can I do to support you that feels right to you? Because sometimes
Mm,
we don't really know where our place is. But the other way is that I met him exactly where he was. I kept loving what's left, if you
mm,
will, like meeting myself also exactly where I was. So sometimes I had to separate the two. I always say I could hold one in one hand and hold the other in the other hand. Loving him, the person is very present and you can be there. And it can almost be also the loneliest form of grief because it's so hard to tell somebody I am grieving a person that is alive before me, but they have changed. And so too have you, maybe even as a
mm.
caretaker,
Okay, thanks. That's super helpful and quite resonant as I am in that place now with a father who recently got that diagnosis. And it seems to me that what you're describing is creating a container, a place to use the tools, the journaling, the talking, the naming, um, in an effort, in a wish to try to control it, but to create a place for it
yes.
so that
And
it doesn't become all consuming. Did I get that
yeah,
right?
it sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes I say you can set an alarm to show up for your grief. I'm going to be with my grief for 4 minutes today. That's either talking to somebody who feels emotionally safe, that is doing something. I always say we want to move grief through the body. So that is
Mhm.
maybe moving the body. It is talking to somebody. It is finding movement through journaling. You know, I always say writing is movement too. I think we we diffuse some of the energy and anxiety around it by moving through it. So if we're not
Mm,
showing up with it, quite often what we have on loop, kind of that anxious grief, is like guilt for thinking about life after loss while we are right here
mhm,
in front of our person. The sadness that can come in waves. They're not even gone yet. And here I am so sad when I have not so, you know, I don't have infinite days in front of us anymore. I know this. And
right.
so why am I so sad in these days? That can come with guilt, right?
Mhm,
Um,
yeah.
Anxiety for what's coming, right? So, how do we diffuse these things that feel so emotionally exhausting? We make a date. We make a
Mhm,
date with them, whether that is teaming up with someone, for example, Rabbi, you know me, and I've been through this experience, and I can be someone that can support you and tell you what our best practices were.
yeah.
Sometimes there is someone else who has been through this experience, and that ear and that openness can often help us. I knew um, that with the very difficult conversation that I had had early on with my father, I knew all of his affairs were in order. I knew what he wanted at end of life, and so I knew on the other side that I would be able to accommodate, execute with love, and honor him in the way that he wanted to. And I knew over time, having been with so many people, I've been in this seat, that there's a lot less of that would haves and could haves and should haves and the things that we have on loop on the other side because we have not had these difficult conversations. So sometimes tending is actually talking about it with
Yeah.
family members that are decision makers,
Mhm,
and everybody trying as best they can to be on the same page so that the time that you do have with a loved one, which we never know how much that will be,
right.
but that loved one that is right in front of us, that we have cared for all of that. I call that the sadmin, all of
Mm. Sadmin,
the
sad
sadmin,
admin
yeah,
tasks.
all of that administration and all of those difficult conversations, so that um, it's very clean and clear. I miss them. I can miss him without thinking about what if we had only, and some of the decisions we have control over, right?
Right.
And some we absolutely don't. But the ones that you can, I say, make room for, make room for rest, make
Yeah.
room for honest conversations, make room for joy without guilt.
Mm,
Create memories while you still can, and you can. We brought we brought the party to my dad, and we took every opportunity that we could to do so.
mm,
Saying what needs to be said
yes.
in ways, I think the myth that I really just want to bust, if I can, here, is that you can't get all your grieving done before someone dies, but you can be in the living, right?
Mm,
Loving what's left is is to me the greatest gift you can give yourself.
mm. Beautiful. I love this idea of scheduling time, right? Tuesday at 10 a.m., I'm going to go to my bereavement group, right? Thursday at 4 p.m., I'm
Yes,
going to go to my yoga class. And those are the times when I'm on the schedule to attend to my grief.
you're
I know
showing up.
that's,
Yeah, you're
yeah,
showing up with purpose and on purpose, with an
yeah.
energy that says, I am grieving. But it also, like you said, it makes a container. So when I
Hmm.
decide that I'm going to journal for 10 minutes, I can also close my journal and decide for that moment, you know what, I'm going to, and seeing it outside of yourself like that, I think is also
Right.
beautiful. I'm going to put it down for now. My grief group is an hour on Tuesday evenings. When I'm done with my grief group, I have tended to it, but I can return. So it's compartmentalizing in a way that
Yeah.
is healthy.
Mm, love it. I just taught at a Shiva Minyan very briefly last night. Um, the difference between grief and mourning. Grief is understood to be our individual experience, while the mourning externalizes it. I come
Mhm.
together with other mourners when I show up. at a Shiva Minyan. And I wanted to touch on this scheduling thing a little bit deeper. I know that some of the work you do is immersive grief work, that I can sign up for a retreat with you and other
Yeah,
grief experts.
yeah,
Tell us more about that. What does it look like to like put a whole weekend on the
yeah,
calendar to schedule my grief?
yeah. It is so transformational. I mean, the physical bodies that I watch walk through the door when they've chosen to take some time away from their day to day and say, I am, take the 20 minutes of journaling in the 1 hour class and spread it out into a long weekend or a week. You are showing up to tend to yourself with others who understand. There will be an unbelievable shorthand, a language that everybody understands. People go deep really fast. They know that they are in the company of others who understand, even if our losses are completely different, even if the people that we love and miss are completely different, our experiences are so much more the same than they are different. So I
Mm.
watch the bodies come in, like protecting their heart, shoulders forward, eyes down. And I see people leave with more openness, with a toolkit that they take home. It was funny. Someone came to a retreat once and they were like, walked in the door and they were like, "Where's the kit?" They thought going to leave with like a big bag of tricks, and they are um, understanding the grieving brain, understanding why we have anxious grief,
Mm.
understanding some of what it looks like to move our bodies with grief yoga, going
Mm.
into nature, writing to our loved ones, talking about our loved ones, telling our story. Sometimes we don't have anybody to
Yeah.
tell our story to. You find sometimes we're like, in the middle of the coffee shop and we're like telling the barista, my brother has cancer diagnosis, because you also feel like in our day-to-day lives that we don't have the opportunity to share our story because we're so fearful that we are going to make others sad, or we are going to be identified as like the sad person in the room. um, and we're not sure where it is safe to tell our story. So these retreats, we hope only you get to decide what is safe for you and safe in your
Right.
body and safe in your experience. But that's what we hope, that we make a safe container and we have all of these modalities ready for you to try on, try out, and see what fits and what feels good and what you will take home with you.
Yeah.
Along with,
Some of our friends and partners, especially those in the Bay on the West Coast, who are here with us today, run a grief and growing retreat at a Jewish camp.
mm,
That's a weekend for immersive grief tending, as you say, in a supportive Jewish environment. But what I'm interested in clarifying, that experience, the grief retreats that you're speaking about, are those all only post-death loss spaces? Because we are
there,
here to talk about what
yeah,
happens before the
there,
death.
yeah,
Yeah.
there are some that are, and they will let you know right away, sort of like what the parameters are. But for
Uh-huh.
example, I am at Omega, which is a beautiful retreat center in Rhinebeck, New York. This October it will be leaf peeping season,
Mhm.
and I'm joined with a colleague who is a movement therapist, and she specializes in grief yoga, and that is an all loss retreat.
Great.
And so you can
Super helpful.
you can show up as yourself, and we're calling it creative grief tending. So
Uh-huh.
this is, a lot of people will also tell us sometimes I can't find the words, and so this
Yeah.
is considering using our hands, using the grounds, using our notebooks, exploring grief yoga and meditation and breath work, and moving these through us, but also just showing up to say, I am a griever in any
Yeah.
way, shape, or form. And it doesn't have to be a recent loss. And it can be sometimes we're not even ready when it's fresh, right?
Yeah.
Or we have our own diagnosis. I had somebody
Great.
come to group a while ago who called and said, "Can I come? I have just been diagnosed with cancer." And I knew the two other people that were already in the group had lost loved ones who had died of the same cancer. And I was a little hesitant, but I know, having done this work for so long, I said, I am going to let the circle do its magic. And it
Mm,
did. There were some
mm,
things that this woman brought to the circle about how difficult it was for her to imagine writing a letter to her loved ones in like that she would leave behind, that she kept trying to do it and kept trying to do it. And it was just too hard. She said there were no words that could sum up the messages and the love that she wanted to leave behind. And
mm,
she got as far as I love you. And
mm,
there was someone else in the group that was so desperate for searching for a note that she thought her mother must have left behind for her. How could her mother have left this world and not left a note? And her mom was the camp mom of a boys' camp. Their family owned a summer camp. And she went up to honor her mom at a service at camp. And she reached into one of the cabin cupboards and she took the sheets out. And on top of the sheet, she noticed there was this ribbon and it was all tied up. And she saw a little note sitting there. And she said, "Oh, I finally found the note." And it said, "Extra long sheets for bunk 12" or something like that. And she came back to the group to share with us that she thought she had finally found it and she hadn't found it. But this other woman said to her, "I don't think as a mother there are any words." And so the two of them met in the most beautiful way that you can never know, and only
mm.
hope that the way that we can see and witness one another. I mean, they both were healed in both ways.
Yeah, beautiful. So I have a couple more questions for you, and then I'm going to touch a little bit on the Jewish angle
Yeah.
before we'll head to questions from the good folks who are here with us live today. One of the things that comes up when we talk about anticipating grief are the dates on a calendar, mom's
Mm,
birthday, Rosh Hashanah, when she would host all of us.
mm,
How might we think about preparing when we're in anticipation of, the grief coming and smacking me in the face? And I should come up with a better phrase for that. But anyway, less violent.
I I
Yeah,
think that I think first of all, I just want to also say like the goal isn't to stop anticipating, right? It's
yeah.
it's it's to stop doing any of this alone. I don't believe
Mm,
anybody should grieve alone. So we've talked about naming it, we've talked about staying in the reality, but I think what you're talking about is creating rituals that can anchor you, whether you are
mhm,
in anticipation, you're having this birthday and the person is not in great health. I have such fond memories of like showing up with like the whale shaped Carvel cake with extra crunchies for my dad. And he could no longer, his food was delivered to him a plate at this point because he couldn't choose his own. And for the first time ever, I saw him take like a big spoon and like go over to the cake and take another portion. So I think what we do is we create rituals that anchor us in the present, find joy, and in the after, maybe that very same ritual is something that you do. We're going to all get together and we're going to have Carvel on,
mm.
on dad's
Dad's
birthday
birthday.
or
Yeah.
his favorite soda. And also, I think the rush not to stay positive, like as we're simultaneously sometimes preparing for the death and trying to be present with what is right in front of us. So
Yeah.
um, I like to pencil in, as I said, like I like to pencil in things in advance.
Mhm,
I on my mother's birthday, I will often take a purse of hers and we go to theater.
mm.
And I have now, it's so sad to me that like they're digital now, but sometimes I go to the box office and ask them to print me one. But it is packed with all the shows I've been to. But it feels like
Ticket
this
stubs.
with the ticket stubs. But it feels like a wonderful way of saying, you're here with me, you're coming along,
Mm,
that continuing bond that we have, something she loved that I can still enjoy. And I often will go with my sister or go with a friend. She loved to shop at discount, So on her birthday, we will often go and buy something at discount. So these don't have to be big. You don't have to make like a golf tournament or the wing of a hospital, but by all means, please do make a giant
We need that too.
donation if you're able. Yeah. Um, but this is so much to carry. What's a small way that you can carry your loved one with you? And to me, when you pencil these ideas in, even if you cancel on yourself, is
Hmm.
to take the anxiety out of the buildup. Like, I'm
Hmm.
getting to that day that's going to be so hard, whether it's the anniversary of a death, the anniversary that you shared with your person, their birthday, your birthday. My
Right.
birthday struck me as something that I never saw coming. Like, I never saw it of a day of sadness on my bingo card. And all of a sudden, birthday became different than birthday. It was the
Yeah.
day in which my parents brought me into this world, and I saw
Mm.
it as wholly different. And I now honor that as a day that I do something where I am with them, where I can
Beautiful.
either give money in their name,
Hmm.
make a donation, or I can treat myself to something that they would want me to have. Sometimes it's to foster my business
Mm.
further. Sometimes it's a class to learn something
Yeah.
new. So yeah, many
Nice.
people think also that this starts after a death. I think if we're missing someone or something, um, that's really when it begins.
Yeah. So we have a nice group of professionals who join all of our
Yeah.
programs also. And from among the questions that were sent to us in advance, I want to make sure to address one that might help the professionals in the room. How do we help people to realize what they're experiencing is anticipatory grief?
Mm. I think it's in the languaging, really. I think asking, are you sad? What feels missing? How has your person changed? Um, losing someone slowly to dementia feels like a thousand goodbyes. So
Yeah.
it's really hard and kind of can be filled with guilt
Mm.
if you are having a hard time. Like, your dad just wants to watch TV when you're there, and the
Mm.
visits are really difficult. So maybe finding something that you can bond. We chose a cooking show that he didn't really have to follow chronologically,
Mm.
but it was something that we knew he loved and that we could share together. Um, so naming those moments, I'm sad that I can't watch TV with him anymore and share this experience. So that sadness, if you hear that, you could say, where is it showing up in your body? Does it
Yeah.
feel exhausting? Does it feel, and naming it, that's why I keep going back to naming, because you can say, I think you're grieving. This is something that
Mm.
we call anticipatory grief.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean that you are already, some people can feel guilty, like we're already mourning.
Right.
So sharing the difference as you did between grief and mourning is imperative, right? This is
Mm.
all grief is the energy that we have in our body on account of loss. We are
Mm.
already losing normalcy, a sense of
Mhm.
normalcy, things that we knew.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes, like I said, finding someone else, pairing your client with someone or a group where everybody gets it. We're all in the same boat. I know that there are, cancer groups, there are caregiver groups,
Mhm.
and it may even be you, like
Mm.
the body that you once trusted, or future plans that you made, or a trip that you can no longer go on.
Right.
When they say those things to you and you hear grief, naming it for them, oh, that sounds hard,
Yeah.
that you have to wait until treatment ends to postpone that trip. It's quite
Yeah.
often I say to clients, that sounds griefy.
Love
Yeah.
it. I'm going to use that.
Yeah,
Thank you. There's a tool for
that
my
sounds
bag.
really griefy. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds really griefy. And I think when you name it for them, they could say, it really does. Because
Mm.
we don't want to attach it to death.
Right.
And so it is it is so different. So we need to normalize that we can grieve all kinds of things. We've
Right.
grieved since we were little, a teacher
Right.
that had to move away or go on
Mhm.
maternity leave.
Yes.
We grieve so many things that we don't name grief. So naming it for them can be helpful.
Super helpful. Thank you. There was a section of questions that we received in advance about Jewish rituals. I'm just going to address a bit of that before we take
Sure.
questions. So one of the questions we got are there Jewish rituals or prayers that focus on impending loss and coping prior to death? So I want to point out the Jewish ritual called Vidui, that is also known as the bedside confession prayer. It's an opportunity to offer last words. The liturgy, the traditional prayer words, are a declaration of faith. The Shema is at the center of the end of life vidui. The Shema is also said at night before we go to sleep because there's no guarantee that we're going to wake up in the morning. And so I wanted you to be aware, you, the collective group here, of vidui as a ritual done in anticipation of death coming soon.
Mm.
We also have other rituals that can be repurposed or thought of differently that allow us to say thank you and goodbye. If you think about the month of Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah on the Jewish calendar, is a month in which traditionally we begin a process of introspection before the high holidays. We take a look back at who we have been this past year. Where have I missed the mark? Who do I need to ask for forgiveness? It's an opportunity to review our life over the last year. And we put together a ritual with our friends at Recustom to a life review, which is an exercise that some professionals may do at bedside, chaplains, social workers, doulas, looking back at someone's life to sum it up in anticipation that it is heading toward an end. So we can do that on an annual basis, looking at where our life has been this last year, but also looking at where our life has been through time leading up to where we are. So there is that cheshbon hanefesh. It's an accounting of the soul. Who have I been and how will I be remembered? Leading into things like ethical wills. One of the teachers that I have in this work is a palliative care doctor who happens to be Jewish, whose books I find to be helpful, Rabbi, and he wrote a book called Four Things That Matter Most. And he encourages people, because he learned this at bedside from years of talking with patients in palliative care, to say, thank you. I love you. I forgive you. And please forgive me. And
Mm.
so those ideas can be found in Jewish ritual, right? The Vidui also has a section about forgiveness, but it's a secular way into thinking about what needs to be said in advance, right? In anticipation. There was another question from a congregational rabbi interested in ritual and texts and coping with anticipatory grief. And I want to remind us, some of you may be familiar with an app called We Croak. I used to have it on my phone, but I couldn't handle the 5 times randomly a day when it would remind me of my mortality. And the We Croak app says it's inspired by a famous Bhutanese, Bhutan, Bhutan, folk saying that to be truly happy person, one must contemplate death 5 times a day. So I want to pull out from Jewish wisdom that we have that. We may not think of it in that way. What am I talking about? The first words we say upon waking are words of gratitude. Moda ani. I am grateful for the fact that I woke up this morning and my soul is still right there in my body. It was returned to me after a period of sleep, right? That's the first time. We have also in the three silent standing prayers, the three Amidas in the morning, afternoon, and evening prayers, a reminder of our mortality in the liturgy. And then again at night, the Shema, the declaration of faith that we say on the bed before we go to sleep. So the Jewish liturgy, even though we don't necessarily teach it exactly this way, offers at least 5 times a day. And it's more, it's there for the taking, an opportunity to be reminded that death will come. So I just wanted to add a bit of Jewish wisdom. And let's turn to some of the questions that are here.
Or if they don't want to admit it themselves, like what can the caretaker or the other person
The
do?
person who's dying doesn't recognize that that's what's happening to them.
Yeah, or they don't want to talk about it.
They don't want to talk
Mhm.
about it.
You have to meet them right where they are, right? And tell them stories about themselves, beautiful stories about themselves, your fondest memories. And some play their favorite music, like be with them in the moment. Like if there is, I love that you're having palliative and hospice. Sometimes we call in those supports too late. Their
Mm,
languaging and their helping you can be so utterly profound. They hear this all day long. So if you need to talk to somebody, call them in. It's not saying my person is dying. I mean, I hate to say this aloud sometimes, but we're all dying.
yeah.
This experience will inevitably touch your mortality, as you said. I work ethical will workshops. I mean, I love that. I think it just helps us to live into what is most important in our life
Yes.
and our truest values. But sometimes it isn't reminding them all the time. It's just being with them in a way that you show up so that the memories that you're making together in that moment, they might not. I saw another question. My dad with Parkinson's wishes, we're talking to him about end of life and he doesn't have his wishes. He doesn't want to talk about it. They sometimes don't want to upset you. It could be
Yeah.
also generational. Like some people don't even come to you when they receive a diagnosis. And you can just tell him you want to honor him. You want to honor him in the best way that you know how. And asking where all their paperwork is. Is there a
Hmm.
family plot? Those are conversations, even if they feel uncomfortable, are good, really good ones to have. You'll be scrambling with all of that at
Yeah.
end of life if you don't have them now. I mean, we never want to upset them. So in the most peaceful moments that you can find, those are when you have them with calm, quiet voices of care.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. We received a question on the side privately. Is it possible, and I think we've answered it, but I want to read the question in case you have some more to add. Is it
Sure.
possible to experience anticipatory grief for oneself? After losing both my parents in recent years, I was their primary caregiver, and I'm grateful for that. At times, I feel like I'm thinking about mortality and death coming for me and my end. Even though I'm not much of a senior, I'm not ill, and I'm not depressed. I wasn't like this before my parents died.
Yeah, your identity shifts. Who am I if I am not a daughter? Who am I on the other side? Who am I as the person now that holds all the family stories? And so yes, mourning that this is not the way that you saw life. Certainly, my experience at the moment, being an adult orphan, it's certainly not what I imagined or anticipated. And it does. I think sometimes I'd love to see what it feels like to show up for the ethical will workshop, because I
Yeah.
think sometimes when we write the ethical will and we see and lean into the things that are very important to us, we realize that we can live backwards into them. Like, oh, um, being with others who understand what it's like to live without parents is
Mm,
important to me. This organization is important to me. Um, uh, these foods are important to me. This recipe is important to me. Can you get together with others and make those recipes to remember your parents? So I think sometimes when we see it
yeah.
outside of ourselves, we can be our own story witness and say, these are the things that are really important to me, or places we've never traveled.
Yeah.
We have sort of this list. If this is the rest of my life, what do I hope
Mm.
that it looks like?
I love it. Thank you. I sometimes remind people, by the way, we're all born terminal, right? So this is about us as much as it's about
It is.
the people close to us. Another question: does addressing anticipatory grief lessen the pain and anguish that comes post-death of partner grief?
I would say that it can lighten some parts. It does not diminish, but it can lighten some parts. Again, I think if you're reckoning with some of the things that you know, you are honoring them in a way that you know exactly what they wanted, I think you will feel so much more peace. And so you can just be, again, with that clean grief, just in the missing and not, what if I had just done this or asked him more questions or said I loved you one more time, say what you need to say now. That is
Yeah.
also a part of anticipatory grief, showing up and not being afraid. Like you can't prepay grief because the love will keep unfolding, but you can show up for the love. So I think yeah, I think it lightens it. But, a lot of people are like, come to me and they're like, I pre-grieved, but
Yeah.
people are telling me that I should talk to someone.
Right.
Yes, yes, because it's so different what you're experiencing while they are still alive than what you will. Uh,
Yeah.
but what are the things you want them to know? Not just how
Yeah.
do you hope that you honor them at end of life, but how can you honor yourself by
Right.
saying all of the things that you want to say while they are living?
Yeah. That's a super helpful reminder that just because we've done the work of anticipatory grief doesn't mean that we're not going to experience grief in a big way after the death happens. I felt that my mom died in April, and it wasn't a shock to my system because I anticipated she had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, right? That she wasn't going to live a very long time. And I think it helped me in the immediate aftermath that we had done, enough of the work. And by work, friends, I mean the planning, right? I was the healthcare proxy, the family plot was available, all the things that we do in our What Matters workshop.
Yep, that's the
Yeah, the
sad.
sad men. It's only now, about 3 months later, that I think, my grief is entering a new place and stage beyond the work that I did in the anticipatory grief to stuff that
Right.
is new. I didn't anticipate it. So I think anticipatory grief can only take us so far. Here's an important question. Gender. Have you observed that men and women, if we're looking at a binary, tend to take or benefit from different approaches when confronting grief? So much of what you've spoken to is about connection with a journal, with others, through a program. And my experience, the person writing as a man, has tended heavily toward solitary wrestling. In other words, have you seen ways that men respond in particular or not?
Mm. I will say fewer men show up to retreats,
Hmm.
but that there are many of my colleagues. I just worked with a group recently to help them develop a men's grief support circle. And I think it's wonderful. I'd be happy to connect you. I think it's rare that you will find that kind of support. They approach it a little bit differently. It's more from a lunch and learn perspective, if you will, where they have these guests that come and men who have experienced different kinds of grief. Um, but I have men in my support circle right now in my Tuesday night group, and it just depends how you want to show up for your grief. I would say that being solitary and being alone is, my greatest hope is that we are seen and heard and witnessed and never alone in our grief. I think that's what everybody deserves. It's my hope. There is always a scholarship in my group. I have a newsletter called Permission Granted, and anybody who's a paid subscriber there, it helps support someone on scholarship all the
Yes.
time in my group. And so um, I'm hopeful more men feel comfortable in support circles, but I love the idea that this one has been created expressly for men.
Someone writes, I find myself having certain mental loops around wondering when my parents will die. Alzheimer's mid stage. What will it be like? How will I feel? Is there a way to try to assuage these loops? Not
Mm,
knowing.
hmm I say sometimes the best way to interrupt it is the story I'm telling myself is, this is a great journaling prompt. The story I'm telling myself is, what I want to know is, you keep interrogating, the thought to try to interrupt it. And also to say, today I'm going to meet my loved one exactly where they are. I think the
Mhm.
idea that we come with presence and meet them where they are, tell them stories about themselves when they can no longer tell you stories about them, give fewer choices, like, would you like this or would you like this? Just again, meeting them where they are. I think we often think there's something to solve, right? This is a moving meditation, if you will. It's going to change on a daily basis. So I think anticipating the death, we can spend a lot of time there
Yeah.
and we can be with the sadness, or we can love what's left that's right
Yeah.
in front of us and choose to experience that joy. It sounds
Beautiful.
counterintuitive because you will do it through sadness, but
Yeah.
you will be so amazed. My dad used to love Scrabble, and we realized, like, oh, game over. Like, we're not doing that with him anymore. But we
Yeah.
took this giant oversized Scrabble set and we started to write all of our names
Mm,
when he could no longer remember our names.
mm,
So he would say them aloud: Barry, Dana, Jeremy, the grandbabies. So
mhm.
it is also being infinitely creative
Yeah.
with the ways in which you meet them, because we will slowly miss maybe them being, the one that you call when you have tremendous news,
Yeah.
and they're proud of you, and instead you have to be the one that brings them the news.
Last question, briefly. Are there stages to anticipatory grief? Is it normal to feel anger with the grief?
The short answer is the stages of grief were created by the brilliant Elizabeth Kubler-Ross when she sat with people who had received a diagnosis and they were for a terminal illness. What she realized is we also feel all of those while we are experiencing a, a death loss and grieving a death loss. Um, I think, yes, we can be angry at the world that are why our person and or
Yeah.
why me, and also sitting in that muck can really rob us of what's left. I am never one to bright side any part of how difficult this is ever. And yet, I think when you realize that the time is so limited, what is it that I can do to meet my loved one and meet myself in some of the joy that remains? Yeah, Rabbi Steve Leder's book, The Beauty of What Remains, was a big one for me, and that was sort of my
Excellent.
mantra throughout. The beauty of what remains. I stay in that
Beautiful.
space.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's really been such a gift to get to be in conversation with you here today, Barry. I want to thank you so much for your openness, your willingness to talk, and for helping us all to spend this scheduled hour with our anticipatory grief. Friends, I invite you to take a deep breath. Thanks for coming live. Thanks for watching the recording if you're watching us. If you need more support, reach out to us. hello@shomercollective.org. We're a tiny team. It will get to me. And if you find our work to be of value, we need your help to make it continue. We appreciate your donations. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Barry, for the work
Thank
that you
you.
do. And I look forward to continuing to be in this big collective space with you.
Me too. And Rabbi, will you tell me your mom's name?
Nan and Ann.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.